So, again, good evening to all of you. Very amazed about this meeting where we had 75 bookings in advance. And so for now, we have 31 people joining. I expect some more to come in over the time. Very proud today to have Marcus as one of our speakers. He's speaking for a chapter for the first time. And actually, he will talk a little bit about himself, and I will also share some things. So today's agenda is I will introduce the chapter in the local group Darmstadt here a little bit and how we behave. Then Marcus will have the major part of the 90 minutes with his presentation. The breakout and Q&A will be included in that, and maybe at the end of Marcus' pitch. If you have a question or comment, put it in the chat, please. And at the end, we will have a short summary. You can rate this event, and we will show you what the next events are if you're interested. We'll see the PDO claim code, and then, it's up to you to do something with the rest of the evening. Some conduct guidelines: you mute your microphone so that no background noises go through. It always disturbs the speaker and also the other listeners. If you use your full name in the session, then we can easier identify you. And so if we are asked by PMI if you attended here because you claimed the PDU code, so it is good when we know who you are and that you were here. We can prove it also. You can show your video if you like. So some are doing that, some not. And if you have any questions in between, use the chat window to ask these questions or comment, or you can even share your LinkedIn link, so people can connect with you. Because, we also want to enable a little bit, the community aspect here. This session will be recorded, and please be kind to each other. What is PMI Germany? So this is Germany, the map of all of Germany, and we have within the chapter 5 regions. You see the 5 regions here, so east, west, north, central, and south. And this chapter is relatively new. It was created in 2020, merging from 4 chapters that were existing at this time. Actually, 3 chapters, because one of the 4 chapters decided not to be part of the merger. That's fine, but it ceased to exist after that. So we have, by the way, one of the chapters who joined was the first chapter in Europe, founded in 1988, the Frankfurt chapter. Within these chapters, regions, which are really southern Germany, you can travel from one corner to the other in maybe 6 hours. So that's easier if you have these metropolitan areas where you can drive for an hour or so and meet other people. So we call this local groups. And we have about 25 local groups in Germany, 11,000 members of PMI. Not all of them are members of the chapter. Only 4,000 are members of the chapter, but they are from 43 countries. So it's a very diverse chapter and membership. And maybe next year or the year after next year, when PMI goes forward with the single membership for PMI members and chapter members, then probably we can welcome all the other 7,000 members into the chapter. 150 individuals are our volunteers. And this is the mission of the Germany chapter. And here's Darmstadt. If you wondered where Darmstadt is, it's just south of Frankfurt. And if you want to come to Darmstadt, you fly to Frankfurt, and it's just 20 minutes from the airport. And Darmstadt is a city of several universities, and a company you might know, Merck, is located there with a big location, and we have telecom and others. So and the space agency, European Space Agency, is also here. So it's not so famous, but it's very vibrant, and a lot of young people are here. Our group is a local group Darmstadt, and we have only English-speaking community, 7 volunteers from 6 countries, and I am the only German. So we have 2 members, Maria, our head, who is also on the call. Hello, Maria. And
Hello,
Olja.
Thomas.
Hi, Maria. And Olja, and both of them are from North Macedonia, a small country in the center of the Balkans. And now I'm also proud of Tufik. Tufik is actually living in Beirut, Lebanon, and still volunteering for our chapter. And although Maria is not located in Germany but in Brussels, so we are diverse, but we are also dispersed. And this is a real virtual team, and I'm really proud to be a member of it. We just had a new volunteer, Almira, and Olja is also with us already for a few months. Marcus is our speaker today, and so yeah, he is working in Zurich in the moment. I think he is in Hamburg on a project mission. He is more than 20 years in business, mostly in finance organizations and with finance process. And he will talk a little bit about himself during his thing. But he is also, and I found him through the PMI speakers list. So you can volunteer to be a speaker for PMI chapters, and he's on that list, and that's how we got connected. So, Marcus, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Thomas. So first, let me take over the screen share. I hope
it works.
Visible. Perfect. Okay. Always conscious of some technology failures, but so far so good. So first of all, yeah, thank you very much for the intro, Thomas, and thank you for having me. Definitely an honor to talk about project presentations today in this session here. And as you said, Thomas, right from data to decisions, always important, but just upfront, right, I will not go into data science topics or analytics of some sort, right? It's more about, how do we process all that data that we obviously have in projects. And I assume right now that most here in the call are actually or have a project management background. And with this, we're probably also all familiar to present, for example, to steering committees or senior management in terms of any project updates, or we need project decisions, etc. And so this is actually quite some important skill, which I believe is not spoken about too much, actually, right? So if you look, for example, at the PMBOK from PMI, obviously communication, we know, I think, is still the core skill or the number one skill of project managers. It talks a lot about, how we communicate or what we should communicate to stakeholders and who are, the communication channels and these kind of things, right? But in terms of when we need decisions from, for example, steering committees or senior management, right, then we obviously have to also make sure that we present things in the right way. And that's obviously what we also, what I'm going to talk about today in this session here. So in a nutshell, so project managers, it's not just managing tasks, right? We also manage perceptions, we manage trust, we manage alignment, and that requires a portion of, in terms of skills, to make an impact and influence also decision makers to get the right things out of, so that, for example, steering committees, because otherwise it could actually backfire and your war project gets jeopardized and maybe goes off track just because some data, which often is also relatively complex in projects, is not presented properly and rather actually causes some confusion. And especially in a data-driven world that we're obviously in right now, we talk all about AI and, as I said, like data analytics, and we get a lot of metrics usually that we also look at in projects, right? We are actually, as project managers, we're expected to interpret analytics, dashboards, right? We obviously have to take care of forecasts. We have to manage KPIs. But if we just present this like in a raw format, so raw data, then you will not get anything done in terms of decisions, right? So it's really about how to translate things and package it, right? And I've seen, and I'm sure you have as well, many presentations and something that has been put up for decision making, which in many cases actually turns into some rather confusion than actually clarity. So, for example, you have a dashboard, let's say, that says 67% project completion, right? Or 67% of the project is complete or something, right? So that for stakeholders, right, at this point in time, just with this information means basically nothing. Because you don't understand, or they wouldn't understand, if that's actually a good thing, if it's a bad thing, and if there's anything in terms of action that needs to be taken. So there needs to be some more context, obviously. So you have to package this whole information in a way that it is actionable. But I think that's
Marcus,
that. Yeah.
may I ask, are you intending to move the slides? Because I
Yeah.
just see the first one.
I'm moving right now.
Okay. I was
No
just
worries.
wondering. So sometimes the slide hangs, and I just wanted to make you
Sure.
aware of that.
Yeah. No. So I things are moving right now. And
Yeah,
before I
exactly.
actually move on with the actual presentation, I first want to, as you mentioned, Thomas, right, I want to just spend a minute on my background. And I usually don't like to, go down like a bullets, like, okay, this is what I am, this is my title, and this is what I've done, and these are all my certifications, right? I don't really like this because, again, right, it doesn't tell me a lot. So what I usually prefer is to run actually, my profile or CV and things like this, right, through a word cloud generator. There's actually a link that I found quite interesting. So they generated this picture here, which basically says, okay, yes, I did work in my previous projects and engagements, right? A lot with transformation projects. I worked a lot with data. I come actually, as you mentioned, Thomas, right, from a finance or banking background, right? And I worked in compliance projects with a lot of data, and that's, I believe, right, that's where my let's call it some data mindset or something like this, right, where this got more developed and where I got more into data and also got more into analytics, and definitely I got more into bringing data into presentations. And you obviously want to get any arguments that you want to bring across, right? In presentation, project presentation specifically, right? You want to back that up with data. But as I said, the key is really how we package this, right? Backing up things with data is one thing, but how we present it, that actually drives then really the decision making, because it has that potential to impact and influence. And that's one of the key things that I want to talk about today. So why is this actually important, right? And here's another interesting link. Actually, Ricardo Vargas, right? He's one of the known characters, right, in the project management space. So many of you probably would know him. And I just recently, just a few days or weeks ago, right, I saw he put this into LinkedIn, this link here to this what's called the Concept Explorer, right? So what it does is really like you put two terms in there, so two words, right? And then it actually links this. So what's the path from one to the other, right? So if I put in their communication and decision making on the other side, right, you see how this is actually linked together. And that basically tells a lot about how we actually should communicate or present information, and data ultimately leads to information, right? How we should present information in a way that actually we trigger or facilitate decision making. Let's put it this way, right? So one thing, for example, is when you look at this first line, there was dialogue, negotiation, consensus building. This basically leads to, or makes clear that whatever we present, we have to structure it properly to keep a dialogue or make it all manageable. And we have to avoid the overload, and we have to create certain or present it in a way that actually, you facilitate a dialogue or a negotiation on whatever you present, right? And then ultimately come to a consensus. Then the other thing is, when it goes to nonverbal cues, emotional intelligence, and building empathy, right? This links to a concept, and we go through this in more detail, right? It's a whole concept around data storytelling. At least it maps in a way to this, right? Because when you present something and tell a story around the data that you have and want to present, right, or back up a particular message with data, right? If you build a story around this, then it engages emotions, right? And it builds that empathy, right? And then it ultimately creates also alignment and consensus. So that is actually critical in steering group decision making in projects. So certainly something that's also to be considered for steering committees. Again, we'll look at this in a moment, this particular concept, right? And then when you think about like the information transmission, so that how you want to get that across, you do obviously some data analysis, right? So for example, right, we have to present some choices. Now we have some options how we want to proceed with the project. We had some decision point, okay, this way or the other, or even some other options, right? Then you have to present it in a way that we can make a rational choice. And that means we have to design things in a very clear way, right? So we have to design for clarity. We need clear design. So in a way, we as project managers, we have to have some designer skill in a way, right? And that links to how we visualize things, right? How we summarize things. So basically to make sure that the information that we present is understood, quickly understood. Often we don't even have a lot of time to bring the message across, right? And then it's all correct. And with it, clarity, you reduce also the noise. It limits or avoids the confusion, right? And this way, you help decision makers actually to focus on what really matters, right? And then a rational choice can be made. The final point is more about articulation, right? How we actually, when we present, we obviously have to bring a narrative across, right? And we have to talk about this. So if you do that in an online way, obviously you want to make sure that the audio is right? It has to do a lot with technology as well. Lots of stuff gets obviously like right here, right now, right? I present this in an online fashion, right? But then also your tone, your voice, the language, right? And how professional that comes across. This is all also very, very important, obviously, right? Because that engages audiences. I have seen often, not often, I would say, but in some cases, right, I've seen where a presentation was really great, but because it was so much material, where so many slides, right, and just not enough time, some people just rush through it. They speak very fast, right, and then it's really difficult to follow, and then it creates another confusion. So this is obviously also important. We'll not talk about this particular point in detail, but I want to talk about these other items that I mentioned, And that's actually those 3 items here. So first, how we can effectively structure a message in the context, obviously, of project presentations, how we can design for clarity, alias also, what are the pitfalls, right? There are many pitfalls. And then ultimately, this data storytelling element, which I'm sure many of you have already heard about this, read about this, and read articles. There's a lot being told about data storytelling or storytelling in general, right? And we'll talk a little bit about this also. So let me go through the first point. And by the way, if there are some questions along the way, right, or comments, feel free to put something into the chat, and I have that open here so I can see that, and I'm happy to respond to this already. But there's obviously at the end also some time for some Q&A. So in terms of structuring the message, right, and I want to talk about one particular point. There's definitely a lot to talk about how we actually structure a presentation, right? So how that's being done in terms of what sections should be used, right? So there are many different ways of doing it, right? So there's not, I think, one particular formula, but what is important is how people actually remember things, right? And that's what we obviously want to do, especially our stakeholders or project sponsors. We want them to remember what's being said. It has to stick, right? And one important concept is to obviously avoid this cognitive load that we often are tempted to trigger because we are often overloading slides with information. Oh, there's some white space, right? And then we have a full risk log, right? Which is like packed with risks. And when we just create or show tables, right? Which is not a good way, right? Because people remember no lists, right? So if you come with a long list of 20 risks or so, nothing of that will be remembered. So people remember categories, and that's scientifically proven. There is a cognitive psychologist, George Mandler, or was, right, who actually did quite some research about this, right? And so when, for example, project managers present dashboards or, as I said before, right, list of risks, right, then especially executives, right, so senior managers or steering committees, right, project sponsors, something may be remembered because of, about the content, right, but definitely will not, it will not stick really, right, because executives and senior stakeholders, they process information very differently, right, than project teams, for example, right? They're not really interested in any detail, right, for basically the detail's sake, right? They're actually scanning for signals that actually affect their decisions. So, and that's where we have to actually avoid the cognitive load. So dashboards or long lists, they actually require stakeholders then to filter and interpret stuff, right? Which keeps them busy. It's a lot of work, and they don't have the time to do that actually. We have to do the work for them to actually, facilitate this, right? So they get the information fast, right? So busy executives, right? They don't have the time or even the mental space, if you will, right, to process like 20 metrics or 15 risks, right? They will not be able to do that, right? So there's also some, or I have seen, right, a lot of dashboards which are really fully packed with metrics, right? It will not work, right? So when you really want to present like risk registers, for example, right, then executives or steering committee members, right, they cut through the noise by asking like 3 questions, basically, right? That's what they want to know. What's the one thing I need to know? What's the risk to my decision? And what do you want me to do? right? So what's the action I have to take? Because you're going, for example, to a steering committee because you want something to get decided, for example, or any decision being made, right, by the steering committee, right, or any action to be taken, right? So first, what's the one thing I need to know? So executives are scanning for actually the core message, right? So for example, a dashboard shows like 10 KPIs, like a cost variance, earned value, defect count, velocity, milestone progress, etc., right? But that's really too much detail, right? So they're saying, just tell me, right? Are we on track or not? What is it, right? So if you don't structure your message, right, then either they actually miss the key point, right? They get confused, or they form their own type of interpretation, which may be even wrong. In worst case, they even see this kind of presentation in a way, okay, this whole project is kind of a mess, right? So you obviously want to avoid this, right? So you have to then summarize this basically that's the first thing, right? To summarize this in a way like, for example, the project is 2 weeks behind schedule, but recovery is possible with resource approval, for example. That would be like a key message which you want to present in a very a prominent way on a slide, for example. But I get to this in a moment, just to give an example, right? The second thing is, what's the risk to my decision, really, right? So executives, they are not processing risk as some, how you say, like some abstract possibilities, right? They're really evaluating this. How does that affect the decision that I will be asked to make today, right? So, for example, you present a 10-item risk register, right? Testing delays, vendor dependency, unclear requirements, etc. You name it, right? Then the reaction would be, which one of those actually matters for me the most, right? Or my go, no-go decision, etc. So if you just present it in a very complex way, that can confuse people. And then, so this means basically you have to actually translate that in a way, right? And last but not least, what do you want me to do, right? So at the end of the day, executives, they actually expect a clear ask from you, right? So for example, if there's a dashboard that ends with like next steps, right? And that lists like 6 project tasks, right? Nobody cares about this, right? They want to know what they need to do. So without a clear ask, right, the decision might not be taken or postponed, right? And then actually it becomes a waste of time. But let me show you as an example, right? So here you have something which definitely has no structure, right? You have, for example, a list of risks, right? So we have 12 risks, or this is 8 risks here listed at least, right? But you create confusion, right? You would, or executive would not know what to look for exactly. What is sticking out? Yes, I see some red items, but what is it? Severity, okay. But then you have no clue where to look at, right? You have to actually ask. You get confused. And the worst thing, and I have to admit, right, at an earlier stage in my career, I made a lot of mistakes in this way, right? So I presented something, and the worst thing I've always heard, right, from project sponsors, that was for me like an absolute killer phrase, was like, I'm confused now, right? So you don't want this to happen. You don't want to have a project sponsor to say, I'm confused now, and then asking some questions to clarify things. You want them to see what you're talking about, and stick this out. If that's confusing and you're talking, then first, they will not listen to you anymore. And second, they're getting confused because it's not presented in the right way. So what would be a better way is to have categories. So 3 categories are actually, as it was by George Mandler, said, right, you have to actually limit this to 3 categories, right? So you can group your risks log into 3 categories. So 3 is like the good number, right? For that reason, I mean, maybe not for that particular reason, but among those reasons why, for example, we have a red, amber, green status. So 3 categories. It's because it's easy to remember, right? There's no trending red or trending amber, and then all of a sudden you have 4 to 5 different statuses or rec statuses, right? Then it would be confusing. Nobody would remember anymore, right? Red, amber, green, clear. People remember this, right? So 3 categories. So for example, you can categorize your risks into resource risks, technical risks, or external risks, like in this example. You can obviously then detail further, but you want them also to know what's the important thing to look at, right? So in this particular scenario here, you have resource risks, which is really the important thing. And that's actually a subheader. Our risks fall into 3 buckets with the main blocker in the resource category. That's what stakeholders should look at. Look, this is my key risk. There's more, right? But and they are here for information. But this is what you should look at: the resource risks, right? That's an important critical point. And so grouping things and always making sure that you actually create categories and not just dump lists to people. And I've seen that many times, unfortunately, right? Where people get confused. That's a no-go for these kind of audiences, right? And then you also want to make sure that you guide people. Here you obviously see that resource risk is marked red, so, and it's bigger than the others, right? And it's even in the subheader. So one would exactly know where to go to, right? What to look for. But then you often have also charts where you may provide different categories even, right? And show this in different color codes. This is obviously not related to risk, but it's just like to understand or provide the concept, right? So here it's about countries with most CO2 emissions, right? So what's wrong with it? Maybe if someone has an idea what's wrong with this chart, it's not a good chart, at least not for a presentation, and definitely not for a project presentation. If that would be, for example, for anything that needs some decision making or some focus. So I'm going to tell you, it's the color codes, right? Or the colors in general, right? So the colors, that way too many colors. So the more colors you use, the less comprehensible, right? Is that visualization. You don't know what to focus on, right? Okay, interesting. But what should I look at right now? What is it? So we need to guide people, to guide stakeholders, right, to that direction, what to look for. So something like this would be much better, because we want to have them focus on, in this case, right, China, because it's the country with most CO2 emissions in this example here, right? So you want people actually to guide, right? And that applies to all kinds of data sets that you're presenting in a way, right? When presented sum to 100. Yes, yes, I mean, exactly the way you want to actually, which chart to choose, right? That's a whole other topic as well, Robert. I agree with you, right? There are some data that you obviously where it's important to choose the right chart. That could be a pie chart, right? And that maybe makes some more or better impact, right? But the important thing is also that you guide the user. With a pie chart, for example, you can make a mistake to have like 50 different categories showing there, right? Which then overloads this whole graph or chart, right? And then people get confused by this, right? You want to keep it simple, just like said at the beginning, right? Keep it simple, stupid. That's basically the credo that we have to follow. Keep it simple, right? For people to make it easy to understand. I have seen many presentations where people think just overload this stuff, right, with things and all kinds of metrics, which shows, oh, we have done a lot of work, great, right? But actually the opposite is the case, because people get confused when they read this and think, what nonsense is this? What am I doing here? What am I supposed to do with this? So we have to simplify things, and we have to guide the audience to what to look for. We have to do the pre-work. I've just recently actually was witnessing a presentation which had a lot of metrics and numbers and tables, right? and one of the stakeholders said that feels to me like someone is reading the phone book, right? And it doesn't really help, right? We want actually to know what does the data say, right? What does it tell us? What conclusions do we make, right? And that's where we want to guide stakeholders to actually lead them there, what to focus on, and then what decisions ultimately to take. So this is this part, right? And then the second thing is design for clarity. So as I said before, right, and this also links to what Robert mentioned here in the chat, right? What charts you use, right, for what data you want to show, right? This is really important. And there are also websites, right, where you can identify the best chart, right, for whatever you want to present, right, is also very critical, right? So it's all links to how we visually communicate properly, right? And we have to make sure that we understand that slide decks is not to dump project documents like risk logs, what I said, right? We actually have to communicate this. They're actually our voice, right? Or our medium, basically, to communicate things, right, to senior stakeholders. And that's why what I mentioned before, right? Designing, or we are not designers per se, right? We are project managers, but we need to some degree have design skills, right? And that's really, really important. Because I will show you some pitfalls, what not to do. I think one, which I think we are all aware of, right? We should not fill up a slide just with text, right? And something, okay, yeah, because we make some things, the keywords, we make them bold, right? So we, for example, we have some update and we have 3 bullets, and then we the important information, we make them bold. Okay, great, at least something, right? But if the whole slide is full of text, right, then it's just like you get hit by a car with this, right? Like, oh my God, I have a lot to do here to read, right? And again, we're not then guiding, we're actually asking the people, read through this, right? Even if you narrate over this, then why would you even then put all the text on this? Because that asks people or invites people to read through it, right? And that is work, and that confuses people, and they won't listen to anymore because they're busy reading, right? So instead, obviously, we can make that a little bit more visually attractive here, right? With some bullets, basically, right? Some icons, things like this. I think this is a very, very basic, right? And I think we're all familiar with this, that this is a no-go to just put text-heavy slides in there. The other thing is, other pitfall is when we just throw tons of colors in there, right? Which is, again, very, very confusing. You don't know what to look at, and you get busy, basically. It's also some sort of cognitive overload, because you get busy actually identifying, okay, I see some yellow lines, right? Does it have any meaning, right? And then there are all kinds of other colors in that picture, right? Which is all very, very confusing, and it's definitely not a good way to actually present something. Like, for example, gun charts, etc., where we may have some different streams, and we all color them in all different ways, right? And then it becomes kind of unreadable. On the other hand, you can also make a mistake if you put everything on a page, right? I actually do that myself, right? I do a plan on a page, but then again, it depends on the audiences, right? I think it's really important that you also obviously make sure that you understand the stakeholders. I had project sponsors and senior stakeholders in the past who actually ask for this. We want all the detail. Okay, then here we go, right? We get a plan on a page, right? But generally speaking, it's too much information. Nobody goes into the nitty-gritty detail, right? And especially the color codes again, right? what does that mean? It's all green. Does that mean we are all on track here? I'm not sure, right? But maybe it's just chosen because I prefer the green color. But a better way, again, keep it simple, right? That might be a better option, at least for most stakeholders, because you want to guide them. You want to guide them what to look for. So we are here today. Here, blue usually means like things are completed. Okay, good. Then red, okay, we're running a little bit behind, so something needs to be taken care of there, and we maybe need to take a decision, and the amber may be at risk because of that, right? So right at looking at this and using the color codes, you're already knowing what to look for, right? With the previous plan on page, you don't know what to look for. You need help, right? And that's definitely that includes work also by the stakeholders, right? Then again, keep it simple, right? But often we have some tendency to turn simple things into complex matters, right? Look at this, and that's actually by a Tagesschau, right? So it's not some small shops that who created this, but it is really, really complex, right? I mean, just by looking at this, it's you need at least, right, a minute or two to actually understand what this is supposed to mean, right? So here it's obviously about the €9 ticket, right? And then whoever bought this, like in this case, 40, whatever the unit is here, right? Yeah, percentage, right? Okay, you see, I also need to identify this first, right? Then, yeah, 40% they bought the €9 ticket, and with this, they intend to actually use less times the car, right? And in 10% cases, yes, and sure, others it's probably, then probably not, no, not at all. But this is complex, right? Better would be just like this, right? Will you buy the new ticket? Yes, I will buy 40%. Will reduce your car usage? Definitely, probably, rather not, definitely not. Very, very clear. I mean, compared to the other, right? I would say like, wouldn't exaggerate here, right? But it's definitely clearer than the other one. So again, right? Keeping things simple, and sometimes we prefer to actually make it complex. And I have to admit, right, in the past I also had that tendency, right, to actually put all kinds of fancy charts in there, right, which became more complex. Just like this one, for example, that is one of the worst charts you can probably put anywhere, right? This three-dimensional thing, it's a horror. It's what we call chart junk, right? It's unreadable. It's just very, very busy, and the information is not coming across because you get just like hit by some three-dimensional, pie chart, which is then also make fancy colors, etc., and gradient, etc. It's way too much, right? So similar this, right? And that's what I mentioned earlier, right? A pie chart can be good in many ways, but if you just load this with everything, right? Again, comes back to this three categories thing, right? Doesn't mean that on a pie chart you can only show three, but definitely this is way too much, and it's an overload, right? It's an absolute killer. Next thing is, often we show data because we find it interesting. I have often heard that, right, where people say like, oh, this is this stakeholder XYZ would be very interested in seeing this, right? Because this is really interesting, right? So take that example here, like this is obviously what we usually see, right, in news, etc., where we get a weather report, right? So, and then it gives you all these views here, right? Is that relevant really for someone who maybe just needs a simple information like, will it rain or not? There's actually an interesting app, right, where you actually just get this. Will it rain today? No. Okay, that's all the information that you need in some cases, right? And similar, we have to think in a similar way for when we go to steering committees or decision-making bodies, right? What information do we need to make a decision? So if I want to go out, right, and I have that decision to be made, right, do I need an umbrella or not? So why do I need all this other information? I don't, right? So you can map this then obviously to like steering committees or senior management meetings, because again, right, people have not much time. There's obviously way much more, but we don't have that much of time, obviously. But then I just want to talk about the third element, which is the data storytelling part, right? And I think you have all heard probably like data doesn't speak for itself, and that's very true, right? And I think we all know this. I've actually heard in some cases, or at least once, I've heard where someone told me, yeah, we don't even have steering committees, etc., or these meetings. We don't have that anymore. We just send the stuff out by email, right? Or put some report together, and here it is, and you can go through it yourself, right? It's not. It speaks for itself, right? Which is very, very wrong, right? You always need the narrative, especially when you present data, numbers, in some cases more complex data, and I think we know this also from the pandemic, when we looked on a daily basis at these statistics, right, death rates, right, and I think we also all know that there was a lot of stuff done in a wrong way to interpret that data because the context was missing. So in terms of how many deaths we have in one country versus the other, and then you actually made the wrong interpretation out of this because you just missed the context in terms of like country, population, etc., right? So that various factors actually that we need to bake in, and that's the same thing for anything that we present in terms of data. It needs context, and it needs a narrative. It needs some explanation. And here's an interesting concept which I frequently use. It's from Nancy Duarte. If you don't know her, she's very famous in that space of presentation and data storytelling. She wrote multiple books, right? And she has some techniques, some storytelling techniques, especially for data-driven presentations, right? And there are four things obviously in there, right? And one thing is, and we can map that perfectly, and we do that in a moment, right? To the project management space, right? So the first thing is we have to identify the hero and the adversary in a story, right? So and I'll give you examples in a moment, right? So the hero is kind of the individual or an entity or group or a team, right, in the data that can move things forward, right? They're actually the ones who actually are the important part, right, to actually drive things forward, right? And then we have the adversary, which is the blocker, right? And it's the one that we avoid, and it's blocking them, right? So the hero could be, as I said, could be a team, could be a development team in IT projects, right? Could be a testing team. It could be also a vendor, so an external party, right, to make this whole project, or a success story in the end, right, by delivering what they have to deliver, right? And then there might be the adversary, like, okay, we actually have a blocker because the approvals are coming not in on time, or we have some way too bureaucratic processes. The skills are missing that we need, right? Or we have some technical issues or technical depth that we need to take care of, right? And what we need to do in this particular piece, right, once this is identified, we need to actually translate the data to make it a little bit more human, let's put it this way, right? So we need to humanize the data because then we see actually it's not just numbers, it's actually a team who is in the project trying to do something and it's battling with an obstacle, right? So that's the first part of the story, and we'll go through an example in a moment. The second thing is the data needs context, obviously, right? So, and that's why we need to talk to the people who obviously do that usually, right? But we have to also then translate that into a certain message that we want to give to, as I said, like senior management or steering committees, right? But the thing is, data as such, especially raw data, right? It doesn't really tell you why things actually happen. It tells you maybe the what, right? And you may understand what's happened, like delays, etc. But you don't understand why that actually happened, right? So you need to speak directly to the people, like a development team, for example, and then understand what's actually behind this. What are the motivations for this, right? What are the barriers, right? And that links then obviously also to the adversary mentioned before, right? Again, let's go through an example in a moment, right? But then first, let's conclude here with the remaining two items, conflict and solution. So we need to actually really name the conflict, but also then give a solution. Every story needs a conflict. That's really important to remember, right? So when you present a story, right, or narrate something, right, you need a conflict. You need to identify it and name it, right? Then it actually resonates for people to understand, okay, that's the problem, right? And then first you identify that conflict and then present how we can actually overcome this, right? So there could be a conflict between stakeholders, could be even related to tools that we use or process inefficiencies or some workload pressures and so forth, right? And the fourth item is with all this, we need to come to a clear ask, a clear message or a question, right, to the decision makers, because again, right, data without context lives kind of in a vacuum, if you will, right? So to make it meaningful, we actually have to, wrap it in what's actually happened. It links all to these three items before, right? And then we actually have to tie this together, right? And then actually come with a clear ask. This is what we need you to do to approve or to make a decision on, because otherwise this leads to this and this. So that maybe means it's all a little bit complex, maybe, or abstract. So let's go through some examples. So let's say, right, you are, I'm an IT guy, right? So let's say you show progress on IT testing, right? Let's say you're on a software development project, for example, right? And you're showing data of, how many test cases were completed in the testing phase, right? And then the chart that you're presenting may have some flattening curve, so to say. So there you don't see progress, right? It's not going further, right? So who's the hero, right, in this whole story, right? Because you obviously have something, you have a problem because some attention is needed because there's no progress in terms of the whole test phase, right? You don't get really the test cases done. So what's the hero, or who's the hero, right? It's a testing team in this case, right? Because yes, they work hard to actually get it done. They actually try hard to actually get the test cases through. But let's say in this case, you have an adversary, which is the test environment. So it says constantly outages, right? And then we're not really making progress because we are missing the proper environment. So clear saying hero, testing team, adversary, test environment, instability, let's call it this way, right? So what's the message then, right, that we want to present to like steering committees, right? Yes, our QA team is pushing hard, working hard, right? But we are being blocked, right, by recurring outages, right? And you don't want to say, for example, yeah, testing is behind schedule by 20% or something, right? Because of environment issues. You don't want to provide that message because that could be misinterpreted in a way. So you want to humanize the data because you have a QA team that's working hard, pushing hard to get this thing done. They actually work on this, but they get hit by this environment. So you have to get away from just plain numbers and actually highlight this obstacles and the battle that the team is actually facing. That's one thing. Then the second item is, as I said before, right, we have to talk with the people generating the data. So maybe the metrics that show then the productivity drop or something, right? You can talk to maybe 2 testers or so, and then you discover that the whole new tool is actually confusing, and you have environment issues, obviously, right? So they execute testing in a more manual way, right? Because they're pen and paper or something, right? If that's even feasible, right? So now you know actually who to really support, right? And that's the hero, obviously, the QI team, right? Because you have to fix the tool, unless the environment, and then get this whole progress here rolling, obviously, further, right? So behind this 20% lag, right, that we have in the progress, right? There's a story from the testers, right? So each outage potentially costs like 4 hours of productivity, so half a day, right? And that's the message, right? So every time the environment crashes, we lose half a day, as an example, right? And then obviously it links to other things like the moral of the team, etc., right? But that's kind of what we can present to the steering committee, for example, to explain this whole situation and put context to data. And ultimately, or the third item, the conflict and the solution, right? So here, clearly, you can name the conflict. It's the environment outages, right? Very easy, right? It threatens the go-live timeline, right? And then what's the solution? As an example, get a temporary cloud infrastructure, stabilize testing until deployment. Okay, very clear thing, right? So how can we actually present this in a steering committee, for example, right? So you can say like, the outages say they actually cause a 20% delay, right? And if that's unresolved, right, then it slips by 4 weeks, for example, right? And then what's the solution? Yes, that temporary environment, right? And that maybe has probably has some cost attached. You can point this out as well, right? And then stakeholders clearly see the problem, and they also see a solution to it and a way forward. And then you can come up with a clear ask to the steering committee. So approval is needed to fund the temporary infra and avoid the schedule slippage. So obviously, I was talking a lot here through this, right? But obviously, this is something that can be just by using those messages, right? You can go through this in a very quick and swift way, which is being stakeholders can follow, and then really can understand the conflict. They understand also what the solution is, so they have all the information they need to actually provide or come up with a decision, right, or an approval in this case. I hope that makes sense, right? But this is kind of one example for storytelling. There are obviously very many different concepts and approaches, right? I usually like this one, and it's always, for me at least, right, always useful to remember those 4 items. So whenever we look at whenever I look at something, some particular problem and issue, and I need to present it to a steering committee because I ultimately need some decision, then I may have all this information that's shown here and all this, including the ask, etc. I have that, but more in a very complex format, right? In a very detailed format, which if you would go present it this way, would not really work out for decision making. So this is kind of a better way to simplify that again, right? And get to some decision making. So with this, and that's where you would come in, Thomas. And I'm not sure if that's easy because I haven't tried this before, right? With the breakout rooms, right? And I reckon.
Me neither. Me neither.
Yeah. So I would suggest to just spend. Should not again, right? Keep it simple, right? Should not overcomplicate this, right? But this is kind of the situation here, right? We have a project. It's an internal HR system upgrade. There's budget 12% overspend. Timeline, yes, phase 2 is delayed, obviously, here by 3 weeks. Benefits, 204 benefits realized. And we have risks. We have one critical risk, and we have some stakeholders that are frustrated with training, right? And we have a team which has a stable moral work actually overtime. They are very committed, right, to recover the schedule. But I think the important thing is here really like we have budget problems, we have timeline problems, we have the risk that some benefits may not get realized, right, because of the delays, right? And we have also that one critical risk, which obviously keeps then also the timeline potentially delayed, right? And we have stakeholders that get frustrated with training because they need to actually get a new system and to learn it, right? And this is something that also is very or is kind of an adversary effect here, right? So what I would like to ask is to group in maybe group of 5, and we can do that in maybe in 5-6 minutes or so, right? And basically, and maybe it's useful because I believe my presentation would not be visible in the breakout rooms for people to, let me just go back, to maybe the next slide, to take a snapshot with a mobile phone or something, right? Because that's what I would like to ask you to come with these messages, right? So hero adversary, who is this, right? And then what's the message, right? Then data and context, right? So we talk to people. So what's the message here? What's the quote, basically, right? And conflict and solution, what is it exactly? And then ultimately have a clear ask to the steerco or decision-making body, right? What we want them to do. So these are these 4 items based on this scenario that I've just shown. So this maybe would be good to remember and maybe take a snapshot if that's feasible. And then this scenario here, probably also a good idea to take a snapshot. I forgot actually to put this as a PDF or something, so it could be taken away. But if that's possible to just take a snapshot, that would be good, unless you can remember all this, probably not. But then I would ask to go into breakout rooms for 5 minutes or 6, right? Not necessary to really come up with some real well thought through messages, right? But I think the important thing is to get the concept, or like, who's the hero, what's the adversary, what's the conflict, what's the solution, and what's the ask, right? Basically this.
Okay, I will open the rooms in a minute, and they will stay open for discussion for 5 minutes then, and then we will come back.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I'll start now. So here we are.
Okay. Hello all together.
Okay. We have lost somebody. Hello, Ahmed.
Hi, Thomas. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Alexander, you're still muted?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
So
And
the point that
Jennifer?
I'm just sitting in a car and driving like highway towards Munich. That's why I just
Oh, okay.
turned the camera
Okay.
off.
You don't see. And Jennifer?
I'm also in a car actually at the moment.
Okay. Okay.
But
Oh, it's
I
hard.
made some screenshots of the presentation from our guest, so I can just put it here. Or do you need it?
Yeah.
Just please wait a minute. Let's do it one way. So which one is there? I think this one. This one.
Okay.
So you can see my screen, yeah, right now.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Okay. So how many active members do we have in our group?
Oh, now we
Would
have
like to continue.
6. So some members came back. Not bad.
Okay.
So Alexei, hello. And Arun.
Hello.
Hello. So
So we have this.
who's
Sorry.
who is the hero? Who is the one who is having the problem, which has to be overcome?
Project information. That was this one. Okay. That's our project situation currently.
Yeah. Exactly.
So Marcus told us that here is a team or an individual, yeah? Remember this time it's our team who has to provide this upgrade.
Yeah. You have an overspend because of vendor
That's
delays.
kind of a problem.
It's a problem, yeah.
So as far as I understand our progress, we have this delay. We have delays in our overspend budget. So the point is that
Yes.
how can we get rid of the delay? How can we just deliver on time?
So what would you say is a hero? The team?
I would say a team. Yeah. And
Any other comments, ideas for that? Christopher, what are you saying?
Who's the hero there?
I would say
The ones who have already...
there is an angle with the frustrated users, right? So they are at 60% satisfaction for some reason, and also we can look into the vendor delays and extra consulting. What does that mean? So these are the two interesting problems I can see.
That's right. So the let's say the vendor delays, extra consulting, these are the adversary to the hero. So the hero is trying to overcome this and to save the situation, and so the vendors and the extra consultants cost money, and they are somehow adversaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, and the data, we have a lot of 12%. Ahmed, yeah?
12% overspend, that's probably connected to the extra consulting. And 50% progress, that's on the benefits realization.
So I said we will have a breakout room for 5 minutes. Maybe the time is too short.
And the
But
3 weeks delay.
Yeah.
Also data, right?
It's also data, right? And satisfaction, 60%.
Yeah, and the five open risks. Yeah, one is critical. Yeah.
So let me close the rooms, because we are in the lack of time, and I also only assigned 5 minutes. So it's a task that needs more consideration, than we can do in 5 minutes.
See you right back.
Okay.
Hallo Thomas.
Hallo.
Dann sauber und tschüss.
Hallo.
Hallo.
Das war schnell.
Viel mehr Videos. Gut.
Okay.
Marcus, you're there.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. And can you see my screen again? Oops. Yeah. So I realize it might be there's been a little bit too much information here to process this in a few minutes, right? But if there's anyone who actually is interested or had some thoughts around this, right? Happy to hear, right? So basically, if I go back, basically these things, right? Hero, adversary, data and context. Well, let's keep it simple, right? Let's say hero, adversary. Who are they, right? Conflict and solution. What are they? What's the ask, right? And just to make sure, right, before you wonder, right, in terms of the precise ask or the solution, it's not particularly named or wasn't particularly named on that slide with the other bullets there of that case study. So there are multiple reasons, obviously, that or solutions could be brought in there, right? It could be anything, right? What you could come up with. But I think in terms of hero, adversary, I think that can be determined relatively clearly. Conflict probably as well. Solution probably is something that there are multiple ways of doing this, right? So it's more like where your creativity can come in, and then what's the clear ask? Is there anyone who wants to, who has determined something?
Martin is trying to say something. Please, Martin, do.
Oh yeah.
Thomas, by the way. Yeah, I mean, maybe just a very quick thing. The hero adversary for us was the hero was a team. So the last bullet point in the adversary, we liked sort of the idea that you had in your example that you put a thing as the adversary, so it's basically the bad budget. The money is not enough. We were tending then towards pushing this towards a clear ask for more budget, with the sponsor being supportive. So that was sort of tending to this one, but we were then stuck in the number 2, the data and the context, where we had a lot of question about what should be asked for, because the 12% is actuals overspent already, and there are more risks, unfinished stuff, more training needs to get better. So I think we need to get more data in order to come up with an ask. And then the context and solution we didn't get to.
No, fair enough. I mean, that's pretty good actually, from what you have done in this short minutes here. And clearly, I think the hero is a project team, yes. And adversary could be multiple things, right? I mean, when you look at this here, there could be the data migration issue. It could be the frustration with the training. These are all blockers, right? Which are slowing things down, obviously, right? And they could be all grouped. And we were there in the breakout room. Was discussed, right? That could be actually multiple things. So it doesn't have to be one, obviously, right? There could be multiple things which form one adversary or one blocker, right? I think that could be used, right? And then in terms of the conflict and the solution. So one example could be, and again, there are multiple things like you mentioned, right? It could be, for example, here's a phase 2 is delayed by 3 weeks, so there's some timeline issue or schedule issue, right? The budget obviously over 12% overspent, so this is obviously a conflict, right? And then there could be solutions like we need some extra funding, we need some, to get some more consultants in, right? Or maybe for the training that people get frustrated, etc., to get some more support, to get some more training resources or trainers, right? There could be multiple solutions, obviously, to it, right? And then, as an example, I mean, this is just one possible way of putting this, right? In terms of a clear ask, right? You can ask for an approval for example, what I said, right? Like extra training resources or extra budget or contingency spend, etc., right? To secure the remaining benefits, as an example, right? Because we have clear benefits here to get realized, right? But that might be at risk because of the issues mentioned, right? So then we link it exactly. And then with the previous mentioned conflicts, etc., right? Then there's a clear path basically from explaining what we're dealing with here, and then what's the conflict and what's the solution towards actually the ask. So that's one solution. But I think it's most important that we have kind of the concept, right? So again, right, data storytelling, there are multiple ways of doing things, right? I use this one, others use different ways of putting this together, right? But again, I want to emphasize again, it's really important that we translate data, right? And not just dump data, which often I have seen, at least, right, many cases it's the case. Yeah, we have here 12% overspent, and we have here the delay, etc., etc. So you're just putting issues. Then all of a sudden there come like response like, oh, you just give me issues, right? You don't give me solutions, right? And it's a typical thing, right? But if you follow a certain process or technique, right, then you actually can map it in a way that becomes more digestible and really comes out with a clear action and decision making. So ultimately, there are 3 elements, right, to close this. It's a structure, it's a design, it's storytelling. And I think, and there obviously what I mentioned earlier, right, there's a 4th item, which is more about how we articulate things, right? How is our tone, our voice, our presentation, how we present ourselves as a person. So that's obviously also something important. But the key elements are really like the structure of the presentation and the structure of the messages, right? And that we don't overload things, avoid the cognitive overload, right? And structure is an important feature there. So categories, think always in categories instead of lists. We work obviously with a lot of lists in project management. Then the design thing is important for how we present things, so it's even digestible, and that we don't create, for example, chart junk and these kind of things. And ultimately the storytelling, and this links then to things like things become coherent, comprehensive, and we engage audiences or stakeholders, right? So, and these are the three elements which I think is important. Keep things simple to make complex project data presented in a more simplified way, right? Then making sense through some logical flow. So the structure, right? So it sticks. People have to remember things, right? Remember the three categories, right? People will remember. And then also capture the attention, right? To motivate action, which is the storytelling part primarily. But that all goes along with each other, right? So just one alone is obviously not sufficient. So this is what I would like to just, this is based also on my experience, right? I obviously was going through a lot of learning throughout the years of my careers, right? And I did make a lot of mistakes, right? And a lot of things are really straightforward and like, yeah, of course it is, right? But then we often actually still do the mistakes, right? Because we think it's this is clear, right? But then we forget kind of a proper method or technique, and then all of a sudden we fall into the traps where we miss something or just take something for granted, and we present something in a way which is really complex, and data becomes more and more complex today, right? And then we lose this way where we get actually a proper decision being made. And last but not least, we also lose the opportunity to really make an impact by actually presenting things in a way that it's not only remembering like options or categories, it's also remembering, oh, I remember project manager so-and-so, right? He did that present in a way and he makes some impact on this, and he knows how to drive things. Yeah, with this, thank you very much. Here's a QR code. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, would be happy to do so, right? There's definitely more to this whole topic, right? And I would be happy to discuss if you want, right? In the past, I wrote a book, not particularly about this topic here, but definitely about data, right? But yeah, if you like to connect on LinkedIn, happy to do so. So with this, thank you very much. And if there are any questions, happy to answer those.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcus. It was a very practical and useful presentation for our daily life, because we are going to ask for help, and how to prepare it. That you showed us very comprehensive how we can start with that. I'm sorry for Q&A. There is not much time left. So if you have something, you can put it in the chat, and we will try to answer you that. So let me try to close the session, because we are a little bit over time. Yeah, and so we are sometimes. Oh, that's wrong. What did I do here? Share. Exactly. So I put the code for the Mentimeter with these 5 questions in the chat. You just click on it, or you can use the QR code here. And please give us on a slide your feedback. For our next event, we have a lot of, and the yellow part, it's only one yellow color these are our sister local groups. So we have the local group in Mainz, which is restarting beginning of September. So if you are living around Mainz, you are invited to visit our Anna Holovina, who is creating this and doing this effort. And we also have local group Heidelberg on the 24th of October. Heike Stock is presenting something here in Heidelberg. Last time I was there, it was a very vivid 15 attendees, so very good meeting. And we have as you see, not only roundtables, but also presentation in September, October, November. And the one in October, just a hint, that's why it's yellow, is the speaker is from New Zealand. So, and we try to find a time slot that's a little bit not comfortable for him, but, you know, acceptable for him. So for Phil Driver, who is a very good speaker. Our members in our group, if you want to volunteer, please join us. And this is the link. And, you know, where the link is on the website also. And this is the PDU code. And I thank you for being here. And I apologize for the slight delay in things. Marcus, you want to have the last word?
Well, thank you. I mean, first of all, thank you for I didn't expect so many registering and showing up as well, right, for this webinar. So first of all, thank you very much, right? And it was definitely an honor to present here. And yeah, I hope to also stay in touch. One is obviously the LinkedIn, what I mentioned, but also in terms of PMI Germany, to engage further and yeah, for a future session, maybe either as an attendee or even as a speaker again. But happy to stay in touch. But definitely, thank you very much.